Welcome back to my channel. It's good to see you. Glad you could make it. I'm going to talk about Senkos, worms, stick baits, how to rig them, and how to do it on a budget. There's so many people out there that, they don't have a lot of money to buy all these baits. They're so expensive. So worms always work. And there's a million different ways to rig them. So I'm going to show you the ways I know, and I'm going to tell you the ways that I use mostly. There's ways to rig it that I almost never use. I never use that approach. So first off, I'd like to thank anyone who's already subscribed. And if you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. It helps me out so much. YouTube does not recognize my channel. Well, how about this? YouTube, the more subscribers I have, the more YouTube will recognize my channel. So it helps out a lot. Share this, like it, make a comment. There's not a lot of people making comments. Maybe I'm just being very thorough, but make a comment. If there's something that I didn't go over or you don't understand, make a comment. All right? Thank you. Thank you for all the support so far. I've only been at this for a couple of weeks, and I think I'm doing pretty good. So without any further ado, we're going to talk about worms. This brand is called Yum. One of the most popular ones on the market is the Gary Yamamoto. That's the original Senko that everyone uses. Yum calls it a dinger. So most of them are salted. Salt. So I just got a couple different ones here. This one's it's like a tan with purple, gold, black, red flake. This is a very popular one. I think the color's called Baby Bass with black flake. I use this a lot. And this is like a green with, I think there's a flake in there too. I think a black flake with a chartreuse tail. I use this one a lot also. I use this one too. But I'm just using these for purposes. And all these setups, they don't have to be this Senko style worm. They can be any worm. They can be a 12-inch long curly tail worm, or it can be a short robo worm, or even a piece of a worm. It can be a piece of a worm. All right, so excuse my dog in the background. I can hear her playing with a squeaky toy, so hopefully it doesn't interrupt us. But anyway, so first on the list is drop shot. Now, to rig a drop shot, out there they sell drop shot hooks. They sell hooks for every type of application. You don't need them. Do they help? Maybe. I don't know. I don't use them. For this application, I would use probably like a small circle hook, but I'm just going to show you how to do it with this. So if you were going to use this on a drop shot, you could use a piece of it. You could cut it in half. A lot of drop shot worms, if you buy a drop shot worm, they're small and slender, and they have a lot of wiggle to them. Now, if you were going to do it, most times if I was going to do a drop shot, I would either wacky rig it right in the middle. I'd put it right in here, like this. Oh, my dog's fighting with the cat. Anyway, just like so. Or a lot of guys I know that drop shot, they will nose hook it. They'll hook it. Right in the nose there. And that way, ideally you want the hook to be hanging out like this, and then this will sort of flap in the water, so to speak. So to rig a drop shot, what you would do is you're going to take your line. I don't have a line, but I'm going to give you an idea of what to do. And there's many other directions out there, but I know many people that drop shot and they love it. It's based on vertical fishing. So you're going to throw it out, and you take your line and you tie a weight at the bottom of it. And then, you'd probably put your hook on first, excuse me. So you take your line and you take out maybe anywhere from 1 foot to 3 feet, depending on the water that you're using. And then you're going to tie your hook on your line, so it's hanging out like this, and then your line's going to come down further. And at the bottom of that, you're going to put a weight, something heavy enough to hold the line upright. So you throw it out, and you're going to have your worm right here, and then your weight down the bottom. Hopefully, I'm painting a good picture here for you. And you're just going to jig it and catch some bass. I do not drop shot, hardly ever. I've tried it. I don't know if I don't have the patience for it. but I know many people that use it and they love it. You know, I have one buddy that's almost all he does, and he catches fish all day long. Another type of thing that you can do with a worm, you can punch it. So you could Texas rig it if you want, or you could wacky rig it. And I'm going to show you how to do those too. So you could Texas rig it, and you can punching means if you have lily pads or mats or something that you can't get through. So you put like an ounce or an ounce and a half or a 2-ounce weight right on the end of it. It can slide back and forth, or you could put something to stop it. It's called the stopper. You put that on your line, and when you just throw that out there, and that weight will bring the bait all the way through the pads or whatever it is. It's called punching it through. And however you rig it, you can nose hook your worm, you can wacky rig it, or you can Texas rig it. If you don't know what a wacky rig and a Texas rig is, that's coming a little bit later. But punching it, it's a popular way. A lot of people do it with jigs. They'll have a jig like a jig like this, you know, or even maybe even something a little bigger. Get out of here. And like this, and but they'll have like a big tungsten weight on it, and that will they'll put a big trailer on this, so it'll be a big presentation, and they'll punch it through the mats or weeds. I also do not do that. I have done it, but for the most part I don't. I look for holes, and I'll drop the worms in the holes. All right, so also Texas rig. So you need an offset hook to do a Texas rig. Which one? It doesn't matter. You'll see in a lot of my videos, I like these ones that are flat right there. This is a wide gap hook. You'll see it's called EWG, which stands for extra wide gap. And I like these because they fit flat. They sit flat on the baits. So I think this is like a 2-aught. So the Texas rig. All right. See if we can do this. So you're going to put it right in the nose here, like that. And then you're going to push it through, like so. Right? And then you're going to thread this all the way through. And then once you get to that offset part, you're going to push it up a little bit. What you're going to do is you're going to wind this and twist it around, so it comes out like that. You still see the eye of the hook up there. And then what you want to do is, I showed you this with my frog video, you want to kind of hold it down straight like this, and wherever that hook is, wherever that hook is, that's your entry point. So my entry point is right here. So you mark it with your finger, and you just put it right in there like so. Now, many people will stress that it has to be completely straight. I'm really not sure. I mean, now people like Mike Iaconelli and some of the other big names, they say, oh, you want to put that curve in it now. You want to do that because that creates more of a swimming action. So when I learned, they said, well, that's got to be straight. You got to make sure that's straight. That's absolutely important. But I'm not sure that it makes any difference, because now the pros are telling you something different. And then what you want to do at the back is you want to skin hook it. So you want to bring the bait up, and you want to push it over the barb of the hook. So that makes it weedless. That's a Texas rig. That makes sense? Okay. What else do we got? And well, with the Texas rig, a lot of times I fish it weightless. And you can use anything. You can use a worm that's a foot long if you want. And it still works the same. You may want to change maybe the length of your hook. You can use small hooks. You can use big hooks. And you can also weight them with your Texas rig. So a lot of times they'll put like a sliding weight. So you have your line coming out. So before you tie your hook on, you're going to put a weight that will slide back and forth. And every time you pull that, it's going to give a little more action for it. And if say it's a windy day, you can use a weight. It's all preference. I almost never use a weight on it. Almost never. If it's a windy day, I may not use a worm. I would use spinner bait or chatter baits, or maybe something that moves, or something I have a little more control over in the water. But I guess it depends on the day. So that's a Texas rig. All right. So you can fish that weighted or unweighted. I use like a 1/4 ounce weight. If that, you can even use like a split shot. You know, the pros out there or people doing, they'll probably tell me never to use a split shot. But it's budget friendly, and it's easy and it works. You know, you don't need all these you don't need all these crazy special special hooks and special lures, and you got to get the certain worms, and you know, buy whatever you have, whatever you can use, and they'll catch fish. And these are just ways to rig it. Okay, so then after that, there's a wacky rig. So wacky rigs, and now there's something new out there. It's called a saddle. So a wacky rig, someone will tell you that you have to use a tiny hook or a small circle hook or a drop shot hook. It doesn't matter. I learned by using a hook just like this, and I caught fish. And I still use it like this. I don't use any special hook or anything. So here, we'll use a different worm here. I like to hook it. You see where it's smooth? You know, and you have the tail here where it's smooth right there. I like to hook it right there. So you can come up, put it in, and like so. You know, that way it gives it a little hang. You know, a lot of people sometimes they want to do it kind of right in the middle to give it a little more hang on the other side of that slippery part. Yeah, you know what? I think that's right. I think I hook it on this part, not that part, 'cause it didn't look right the first time. So that's the wacky rig. Very simple, very effective, and well, I'll tell you at the end of the video what I use worms for a lot of the time. But that's good. Now, if you want your plastic maybe to last a little longer and get a few more bites, you can invest in one of these. I got this at Bass Pro. These are these little O-rings. See if I can get one off. Pull one off here. See? All right, so you buy these O-rings, right, and you slide them over this genius tool here. It's just a regular screw into this tube. Right? So, like I said, a lot of times I'll hook it right there. You know, so you just take this and you drop it in there. Oh, excuse me, wrong way. And you would drop it in tail first. Right? Drop it in tail first. Right? Or I don't think it really matters. I was going to say tail first, but it doesn't matter. So, and then you put it in there, and then you pull one of these little O-rings forward, like so. See how I moved it forward up this cylinder? And then you put your O-ring, slide it, and it's going to go right up and over your worm, like so. And then you can take your hook. You can use a hook just like this. Someone might tell you that you need a small hook or whatever you need. This will work, I promise. And then you just, rather than put it through the bait, you hook it right up underneath that O-ring. Sometimes I use this, sometimes I don't. I think all it does is it might save your bait a little better rather than poking holes through it all the time, because when the fish bites it, it may rip the hook off, but the O-ring is going to save, and then you can just use the O-ring again. You can move it a little to another section of the worm. Make sense? All right, good. So O-rings. And now they have something out that's called a saddle. I don't know if there's anything to it. So it's basically two O-rings put together, and you put it on one side and you put it on the other side, and then there's two O-rings, and then you put your hook through the middle part. It's just another thing to buy. I'm not sure that anyone really needs it. Okay, so then with worms, you can use a Carolina rig. Now a Carolina rig, it's almost the opposite of a drop shot. So the drop shot, you had your hook, and then you had your weight. Excuse me, hook and then weight, and then your fishing rod is up here. So the bottom of your line for a drop shot is your weight, and then further up the line, you have a dangling hook, and that is your worm. Now a Carolina rig, a lot of people use a separate leader for this because you can put multiple hooks on a Carolina rig. So what you're going to do is you're going to have your line coming off, and you might have like a barrel swivel, and then you're going to attach a weight there. And then there's another line that comes out after that, and some people use Carolina rigs 3 or 4 feet long, and then that comes off, and then you're going to hook your worm at the end of that. A lot of people will nose hook it for that, or Texas rig it. I don't know anybody who wacky rigs it for a Carolina rig, so that's a nose hook. That's what it does there. The pros and everyone out there, they'll say you need a tiny hook for it. You don't. This is going to work. It'll work just fine. Yeah, the only thing I recommend about if you're going to do a Carolina rig is find a worm that has less salt in it, so it will float. It'll be more buoyant in the water, because ideally you want that weight to weigh it down, and then this is going to float up and be in the current and move around and have some motion. Now, if you're ever wondering if it has salt, stick it in your mouth. Very salty. And this one, not as much, and so on. So higher salt, the more it sinks. Lower salt, the more it floats. And they do sell worms that just float. You can go get a worm that floats. But now I need a drink. So anyway, I would find one that has less salt. I know that Zoom, I think they advertise on the ones less salt. There's a company called BioSpawn. I think a lot of them are low salt. But like Gary Yamamoto ones, high salt. These Yum Dinger ones, high salt. A lot of Yum brands are high salt. All right, moving on. I already taught you about the nose hook. Then there's the Ned rig. So the Ned rig is a jig head. This one might be a little big for the application. Now you can go to a store and you can get a Ned rig worm and you can get a Ned rig jig head. This is just a regular football jig, and I'm going to use it for a Ned rig, and it works just fine. So what you would want to do, what I would do anyway, is where you see that silver part there, you would cut it right about here at the end of that silver part. And if you don't have scissors, what we do in the fishing world when you're on your kayak or your boat, we bite it off. So then you have this piece here. Now you can go out and you can buy Ned rig worms, because no one wants to be biting them and whatnot. Now you could use this piece, but I would, like, if they were hitting the Ned rig and this got all beat up, I wouldn't go bite another worm. I would just put this one on, and it'll work just fine. So the Ned rig it's a jig head. It's finesse fishing. You put this through. You try to worm it on as much as you can, and then you pull the hook through, and you push this down over the jig head. Excuse me. Push it up, and you tie that on. This is how we did Ned rigs. And then when Ned rigs caught on, I think Z-Man is the first one that came out with it. And to be honest, the worms that you can buy for Ned rigs, they're more durable. They stretch a lot more as opposed to these. So this is your Ned rig. And what you're going to do is you're going to throw that at the banks. You're going to throw that in cover, and you're going to fish it real slow. It's going to go, it's just going to bounce along the bottom, and you're going to get this action right there. It's very slow. I would actually probably use a smaller hook for this application. That one's a little big, but you get the idea. And it's very slow fishing. You just throw it at one spot, or even if you see a wake, or that there's a fish there, you can throw this. It works very well. So we have the Ned rig. And then there's another way I do the Ned rig. I'm not sure if anyone else does it, with an underspin. I don't know if you know what an underspin is. So this is an underspin. It's basically a hook with a keeper. There's different types. This one's an underspin, and this one's an underspin here. So all you do is, sometimes I will take this off, and you just put this on the same way. Over the keeper there. Slide it on. Trying to watch the camera and not stick myself. So on. This one has a bait keeper on it. Not the best application, but you get my drift. So what this looks like, to me, it looks like like a little fish feed at the bottom, and they almost go straight up. That's what it looks like. And it has a little more weight to it, and it's going to stick. This is going to lean a little bit more than the football jig. The jigs tend to stand straight up, and the Ned Rig jig heads, when you buy, they're really flat on the bottom. I think they're called the mushroom one. Ideally, that's going to work. But if you keep on it, this is going to work. It's going to look like a little fish jumping up and down. Now, for this application, most times I'll take some snips, and I'll snip this off. All right, that is the Ned Rig. Then there is the Nico Rig, if you have not heard of the Nico Rig. So I'll put this down. What do I got here? All right, so the Nico Rig is pretty cool. You have your worm. Ideally, the way we all learned was to take like a finishing nail, a small nail, and sort of drill it into the end of this. Just push it in, and that's going to give you weight like this. Very similar to the Nico Rig, except it's a full worm. And you would, but I use a screw like this. I'll take it, and I will screw it into the end of the worm. And if it's not flat enough on the end, you just bite it off, and you make it much flatter. So, screw it in here. Mm-hmm. 10 years later, right? So what it does is it adds, obviously, extra weight to the tip, very similar to the Ned Rig, and it's going to bounce along the bottom, and it's going to bounce vertically, but you're going to be pulling it horizontally. This is probably one of the only applications where I would say, now, a lot of people will wacky rig this, so screw that right into the end of it, and it's going to make it top heavy. So you would take your hook, and so you're going to have your line on this, right? And you would hook it. It's kind of like a vertical wacky rig. A lot of people do it way down here, and I'm one of those people. You'll hook it in, and go like this. So you're going to be pulling it like this across. And the bottom here, is, sorry, my dog's going nuts. What's the matter with you? You gotta go out? You gotta go to the bathroom? Give me a minute. Sorry, the interruption. So, and I like to use a screw, like a flathead screw, because when it goes along the bottom, it's going to make noise. It's going to make a little bit of a rattle, as opposed to just it moving, and not making any noise. Sometimes I like a bait to make a little noise. If the water's choppy, I'll try to make a little noise underneath. All right, what else do I got? So I think that's it. I got you can use just a straight jig head too with worms. So you can put it in like so. Just the way you did a Ned Rig, except it's a big worm. You got to keep it out of brush piles and things like that, because it's not weedless. Oh, that's a horrible hookup, but you get the idea. So, that's a bad one. This hook is too big for that worm, but you can just use a jig head, and they're fine. All of these things work, and any variation of them work on any type of worm. I specifically, as you can see, I like greens and browns. On a overcast day, I might use some dark blacks and blues, like these type of colors here. I might do that. Even some purples. But I use, and then I use something else. Mike Iaconelli, who I'm a fan of, he used to call them shock colors. He probably still does call them shock colors, but I saw it on a video, and I call it the same way. Like the pinks, the chartreuse, and the white. I use white a lot. I find that it works well, especially even like when I get the screws for the Nico rigs, which I use a lot. The Nico rigs, they're great. They work wonderful. My last thing that I want to say like, subscribe, share, ring the bell. Please just subscribe. YouTube, they don't recognize you. So I want my channel to get popular, and hopefully I got good content. And if I don't, tell me what you want to hear, and I'll do my best to deliver. Ultimately, I want to be successful doing this, and really help people if I can. Most of this is all budget friendly with worms. And one thing you can do with almost all those applications is you can use a worm as a follow-up bait. And if you don't know what a follow-up bait is, that's when say you're burning a spinner bait, or you're using a chatterbait, or you're using a frog, and something hits it but then lets go. Remember that spot in the water where it was. You should always have some sort of worm tied on at any given time, if you're in a boat or a kayak, or even on the shore. And then you reel that in as fast as you can, and then you take the slow-moving, slow-sinking or fast-sinking bait, and you just throw it into that same spot. I would say about 70 to 80% of the time you're going to get a hit. Whether you hook up with the fish is a whole different story, but that fish is still there. That fish hit something, and then it went away, and the fish is still looking for the food, and it's not there. And then something's going to break the surface and fall down, and they'll be like, oh, how convenient. And hopefully you get the fish. All right, so like, subscribe, ring the bell, share. I don't know, it's great. This is fun. I'm having fun. I hope you're having fun. I hope you're learning something. And until next time, I'll see you later. All right, be well. Keep fishing.